Epstein was sentenced in 2008 to 18 months imprisonment for soliciting an underage girl. Peter Mandelson goes and stays in his flat, his townhouse in Manhattan in 2009. And at the time, Peter Mandelson's business secretary. So we've got the business secretary staying in the townhouse in Manhattan of someone who's been convicted of paedophilia. You find this out. Did anybody ask him about this? We talked about financial conflicts of interest. Is there room on the form for putting in conflicts of interest in relation to friendships?
No, it's not a sort of reputational conflict that's being targeted by that form chair. It's about reality or perceptions of economic and financial conflicts.
Okay.
Sorry, conflict of interest slightly more broadly than economic. For instance, if Lord Mandelson had been a trustee of a prominent environmental charity and had been working on pursuing Britain's environmental agenda in Washington, he would have declared that to us as well.
And a final question on that part of the process. So before you had that interview, would it be one in which it was up to Lord Mandelson to declare anything, or would you go to that interview having done some work on what was in the public domain and to question him about?
On conflicts of interest specifically?
Yeah.
No, that process depends on the candidate disclosing themselves things that they think are of potential or actual risk. Obviously, if he had not raised his shareholding in Global Counsel, I would have queried that because I was well aware of it. But there isn't a sort of proactive duty on the employer to seek evidence and intelligence to put to the candidate. This is a process that depends upon the candidate having a shared interest with the department in managing and avoiding conflicts.
I'm trying to gather my thoughts because there's a lot that's coming our way. So to reference the earlier question I asked, there were a number of vetting processes, you've just set them out. But did none of those flag that a well-publicised friendship with the world's most notorious paedophile might be a problem to the government?
Well, may I, Chair? Because I think what Chris was getting at earlier is, if I, approach this chronologically, back before Lord Mandelson was announced as the appointee, there was a process which Chris will be happy to talk to, done within the Cabinet Office to make sure the Prime Minister was aware of Lord Mandelson and the issues around his appointment. There was then a process of clearing his conflicts of interest, which the employing department oversaw, which we've talked about. And actually in parallel with that process, we also went through the standard UK security vetting, national security vetting process for DV. So I think the one of those processes where we can confidently say the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was indeed surfaced was the first of those processes. As Chris has explained to you,
which is the due diligence one, just to make it absolutely
we're not
clear.
at liberty, just to at risk of being boring, we're not at liberty to say whether or not it would have come up during the national security vetting process. And it was not regarded, it would not have been regarded, I would have been surprised to see it on a conflict of interest form, because that's more about offices, interests and assets that you hold that have a bearing on the government's reputation.
Do you think your due diligence and vetting process is fit for purpose given what we're discussing?
Well, on your original question, and we'll cover this when we cover the due diligence exercise, and as I'll put in the letter to the committee, all public knowledge about Lord Mandelson from the open source due diligence that we did was included in the due diligence, including his relationship with Mr. Epstein. Was that fit for purpose? Well, we believe it could be improved. And that is what.
That's an understatement, isn't it?
No, because the issue over which Lord Mandelson had his was withdrawn from Washington was information, and the Prime Minister set this out very clearly. That was not available to us at the time that the due diligence was done. The Prime Minister has been on the record about this and has explained exactly why he took that decision. So there are two issues here. There is the process, and as I say, we believe the process can be improved, and indeed we have improved it, and there is what information was available at the time, and the issues over which the ambassador was withdrawn from Washington was based on information that was not known at the time.
Do you have any other questions, Uma, before I move on to others?
Can I suggest then, in light of your answers, thank you both, that perhaps associations with well-known paedophiles are flagged for any future appointments, because none of your processes seem to flag it as an issue?
That's not correct. So as you'll see from my letter,
we'll get on to
my letter, Lord Mandelson's connections with Lord Epstein were flagged in the due diligence exercise that the Cabinet Office carried out.
In terms of timescales, so he was appointed on December 20th.
That's the date of announcement.
Were you asked to fast track the vetting process? Because that's a very short time frame to appoint somebody of such a senior position.
There is provision within our, and I think most departments, arrangements with UK security vetting, who do the vetting process, that we're allowed to ask for a number of priority clearances every year to make sure they sort of jump the queue to be done earlier than others. And we use that for Lord Mandelson. It doesn't mean there is any difference in the process, and it's a standard product that UKSV offer. So yes, it was faster than some people's clearances will have been. That's not because the process was different. It was because we advanced him up the queue.
And so in any of that process, was any part skipped or removed or stripped entirely? No. Nothing was removed. Okay, and do you think you had sufficient time to carry out meaningful checks?
So as what I can say to you, Ms. Mohammed, is that I am absolutely confident that UKSV undertook the process in precisely their standard way, doing all of the checks they would expect to do, and we had ample time to assess and decide on the basis of their work.
And given that he was eventually came to position in February, were you satisfied at that point that the information that was already in the public domain would not cause any potential reputational embarrassment?
So, at risk of sounding like a pedant, that wouldn't have been a judgment for me to make as part of the vetting process. The important decision on that had already been taken some time before, when it was decided to appoint him.
I just want to try to understand this a bit more, because I think to many people it feels like common sense was perhaps thrown out the window. Publicly available information about vetting says that the vetting interviewer will ask about friends and associations. So one might assume that as part of that process, I appreciate you're not going to tell us the detail of it, things came up about Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. In the due diligence process, we are aware that publicly available information, which I've read out some of it already, will have come up about Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm just wondering whether any of this information at any point, in any way, triggered anybody at the Cabinet Office or at the FCDO to ask any further questions to establish the full context of the former ambassador's relationship with Epstein.
Well, as I said before, there are two things that happen in these processes. There is the process of fact-finding, which is what I've described, and then there is the process of judgment as to whether the issues that have arisen are material to the appointment. The issues you're raising are in the second category, and as I say, the Prime Minister has already explained in really quite some detail in media interviews and elsewhere what he did, why he did it, and then why he withdrew.
That really isn't good enough. I mean, it really isn't.
Well, I'm
good
sorry.
enough.
That is the position.
Let me just come in behind Afra on this. Look, at the time when there was due diligence, right, when you were looking at what's publicly available, if he'd come before us, we would have looked in the internet, we would have Googled, and we would have found that Channel 4 had done a documentary, The Prince and the Paedophile, which clearly highlighted Mandelson's links with Epstein. we would have given consideration to what was in the Financial Times and the Guardian reports in June 23, which referenced the JP Morgan internal investigation. And I think which gave the most damning of all, which was when Epstein was sentenced in 2008 to 18 months imprisonment for soliciting an underage girl, Peter Mandelson goes and stays in his flat, his townhouse in Manhattan in 2009. And at the time, Peter Mandelson's business secretary. So we've got the business secretary staying in the townhouse in Manhattan of someone who's been convicted of paedophilia. Now, my question is, you find this out, presumably you've got a researcher who can do what, my researcher did, and you find this out. Did anybody ask him about this? I mean, and when did anybody ask him about this?
Well, as I say, I've probably gone as far in answering this question as I can. The Prime Minister has described, as I say, in quite some detail the decisions that he took and why he took them. And as I say, the questions you are raising are about the judgment part of this exercise, which, as I say...
I'm not asking questions about that. What I'm asking about is not the judgment, because as you've said, it wasn't your judgment, it was the judgment of the Prime Minister. What I want to know was the Prime Minister let down? Was the Prime Minister told that Epstein had stayed in Mandelson's flat? Sorry. That Mandelson had stayed in Epstein's flat in Manhattan in 2009 when Epstein was serving 18 months for paedophilia. Was the Prime Minister told that? And was the Prime Minister told what Mandelson's answer to that challenge was? Because if the Prime Minister wasn't told that, we can hardly say, pass the blame on to the Prime Minister for not using his judgment. What information was he given?
Nobody is passing blame anywhere. I'm simply factually describing what happened, and that question is also one that the Prime Minister has been asked and answered on the media, and I believe he has said that he does not believe he was let down either by the process or by anyone involved in the process. I think that was his answer on the 15th of September on Channel 4 News.
Did the FCDO have a different view about who should be recommended for the posting?
By the time we're describing, it was clear that the Prime Minister wanted to make this appointment himself, and had therefore I understand that the FCDO was informed of his decision and acted upon it, and via the Foreign Secretary sought and obtained the King's approval for the appointment. But we were, in this particular case, as Chris has explained, the Prime Minister took advice and then formed a view himself, and we then acted on that view.
Just so we're clear, the due diligence report that was produced by the Cabinet Office goes to the appointing minister, in this case, it's the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister received that report, which should have contained all of the information pertaining to Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, according to your own submission to PACAC, which is that it included reference to his prior relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. So the Prime Minister got a report that outlined that relationship, and as the appointing minister, he then makes a decision on whether or not this person is suitable for that appointment based on that report.
I'll answer in the general rather than the specifics of the case. I've set out in my letter exactly what the due diligence report covers. The process then for any direct ministerial appointment would be that is shared with the appointing minister, and they take the decision. Just to correct something that was said earlier. I appreciate you talking
in the general, but just to the specifics, your own letter to PACAC says that the due diligence report included reference to his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, that's the bit I read out.
And confirmed that the report goes to the appointing minister, who in this case is the Prime Minister. So
and a section of internet searches which summarises news reporting available at the time.
Yeah. So
exactly
even
as
if we're
set
talking
out
in the
in
generals, in the specific in this case, the Prime Minister did receive a report that highlighted that relationship, and it was up to him to make a decision based on the information.
For a direct ministerial appointment, that is the process. Now,
what I think is really important for us to be clear about, and I'm sorry to keep wanging on about this, but was the Prime Minister told that Peter Mandelson had stayed at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2009 when Epstein was in prison for soliciting an underage girl?
I've said as much as I'm going to say about the content of the due diligence report,
Why can't you tell us that? Why can't you tell us that?
In my letter. Well, so for the long-standing reason that we protect advice that goes to the Prime Minister, I've actually gone a long way in describing what this due diligence report covered as set out in my letter, and that is as far as I can go.
Can you give us a list of the articles and the when you refer to the news reporting available at the time? Can you give us the list of the news reports that you sent to the Prime Minister?
I've set out in my letter as far as I can go. If the committee is requesting full information, I'm quite happy to take that question away and see whether there are other things that can be shared. But as I say, I've set out in my letter the information that I can currently make available.
Yeah, so question number one is, did you tell the Prime Minister about Mandelson staying in the Manhattan townhouse during Epstein being in jail? And if you can't answer that, or you can't give us the answer we want, then what media reports did you give to the Prime Minister so that he could at least read it for himself?
I will consider whether there is further information that can be shared, and I will write to the committee.
Anybody have any further on this? You want a question on this?
Well, it seems to me like Sir Chris quoted the Prime Minister saying that he wasn't told when he was interviewed on Channel 4 News, but it seems to me you're telling us the opposite.
No. I think the part of his interview you're referring to is the information that subsequently came to light of the new emails that no one was aware of at the point of appointment. I think the part of the interview you're referring to is when he's discussing that.
I want to come.
Yeah, all right, do come
on. So, Chris, I would like to, and so Ollie, I'd like to move on to specifically the new information that became available, which led to the departure of Lord Mandelson as ambassador. Just to be clear, did he resign or was he sacked?
He was withdrawn. He did not resign.
I'm sorry?
He was withdrawn from post. He did not resign.
He did not resign, so he was sacked.
As I say, he was withdrawn from post.
Okay, so the new information which were contained in the emails which were made available to Bloomberg, was that the first knowledge you had of their existence?
It was when this issue arose back in mid-September, that was certainly the first I'd heard of such emails, yes.
So the US administration that had the emails had never made available any information to you. It was only through the media that you found out.
I certainly wasn't given information by the US government, no.
Okay, so Bloomberg obtained the emails, I think on a Tuesday evening, and obviously the Foreign Office then analysed them, but they didn't tell the Prime Minister until after he had appeared in the House of Commons the following day to express his confidence in Lord Mandelson.
Well, we received the material. We asked some questions about that material, which the Prime Minister has commented on in his public remarks. I can't speak to exactly what he saw at what point, Sir John, but Chris and I were in constant contact about it, and I was briefing the Foreign Secretary as to how we were pursuing the case. The issue here, I think, and
it must have been apparent to you before the Prime Minister got up at 12 o'clock on Wednesday that this was pretty explosive. And did somebody not say to Number 10, hold on, just before you express your complete confidence in Lord Mandelson, there's something here you might like to be aware of?
Well, Chris may be able to say a bit more about the process by which the Prime Minister has briefed Prime Minister's questions. The fact of this media inquiry, which obviously I knew about, was also known to Number 10. Chris and I had discussed it, and the Foreign Secretary, Chris, and I were clear that this needed to be dealt with sensitively and as a management issue. We needed to be, I know in the kind of context and tone of this hearing, this may sound naive, and forgive me for that, but I needed to behave to Lord Mandelson as an employee to whom I owed a duty of care. He was in an extremely exposed position, and I had to make sure I was thinking about and looking after the way in which we were dealing with him, and dealing with him fairly and transparently. So the way we did that was to make sure that we were asking him firm, rigorous, clear questions about the material, but not seeking to involve ministers in the detail of those questions and how we were approaching it, in order to avoid any sense in which he was being treated differently from other employees.
So you're saying to protect Lord Mandelson, you gave no indication to number 10 before Prime Minister's questions that you had come across information which might cause serious doubt as to the appropriateness of his position.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I think the Prime Minister's on the record as saying he was aware that there was a media inquiry before Prime Minister's questions. He knew that we were in touch with Lord Mandelson about these issues. As I say, I was not involved in briefing him specifically for Prime Minister's questions, but I don't think it would be fair to say that number 10 were unaware that we were in this dialogue with Lord Mandelson about this issue.
But they then said that new information had become available after the Prime Minister had expressed his confidence.
The emails were only published later on that day, and at the point that the Prime Minister stood up at Prime Minister's questions, Lord Mandelson had not had an opportunity yet to comment himself on the points that had been raised with him about the veracity and
you had not told the
Prime
Minister.
Sorry?
You had not told the Prime Minister at that stage that there were all of these emails in which Lord Mandelson was expressing his continuing support and friendship for Jeffrey Epstein.
I had not personally spoken to the Prime Minister about it, no.
Well, what about your department? And the department briefs number 10 prior to Prime Minister's questions.
As I say, I was not involved in briefing the Prime Minister for Prime Minister's questions, but as I think the Prime Minister is on the record himself as saying on the 15th of September, he was aware of the existence of the media inquiry, and he knew that official inquiries were being pursued.
Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, Sir Oliver is completely correct, and again, the Prime Minister has answered these questions in detail in his media interviews, both what he knew before PMQs and why he took the decision after PMQs. He does say that in retrospect, and I'm quoting exactly, it would have been better if I had been shown the details of the material before PMQs.
But this goes back to what the Chair was saying earlier, that the Prime Minister is under fire essentially because the Foreign Office did not properly inform him.
No, I don't think that's true at all. So the Prime Minister, as we've said, was aware that there was an issue, but not the nature of that issue. The investigations into the nature of that issue were underway at the time. It was an extremely fast-moving situation. The situation clarified itself later that evening, and the Prime Minister took the decision that he took. As the Prime Minister says,
I'm sorry, but the point is this, isn't it? You can tell the Prime Minister there is an issue and that is being clarified. It gives the Prime Minister no idea as to how serious that issue is. So,
it's true.
So saying, "Oh, there's an issue, we're clarifying it," will mean that the Prime Minister is likely to say, as one would hope, as a good employer in the end, that he would say about everybody, is, "I have confidence in my staff," because no one's told him anything other than that. But you had the information, and you were keeping it to yourself and letting the Prime Minister down, weren't you?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. Now, you make reference to good employers, and I'm sure everyone on the committee does this with their own staff. If there are issues, you wait until you've investigated them properly, certainly before you say anything about them in public. And as Sir Oliver says, although he's a very high-profile individual, Lord Mandelson deserves to be treated as any other employer. That at that point you had some allegations from a media organisation that clearly needed
allegations. It was copies of emails.
Well, that needed to be looked into in the course of that day. That was completed, and the Prime Minister
must have realised that the contents of those emails were explosive. That it completely changed the perception.
Well, no, it was consistent with him staying. Sorry, I'm banging on this again, but it's consistent with him staying in Epstein's townhouse when Epstein's in jail for paedophilia.